Okay, this is an overview on Chapter 15. It's focused on populations, the environment, cities. So let's get started. Here, let me make this a little bit bigger here. All right, here we go. Demography. Demography is the study of populations, the size, how they're composed, how a population is distributed within a geographical space, and also, of course, demographers study changes in human population. And demographers are very interested in things such as fertility rate, mortality rate, rates of migration, immigration, emigration, all of those types of things. So I am not a demographer, but I find it very interesting in terms of how we can draw information from these studies. In fact, the U.S. Census Bureau is focused on studying how the population in the United States has changed, how the distribution across the states has changed, the composition, how we've changed as a society in terms of who composes the society, all of that. Fertility rate is the average number of births per 1,000 people in the population. Now you notice it doesn't say per 1,000 females, it says per 1,000 people in the population. Mortality rates are, here the focus is on how many people per 1,000, how many of them in an average year die. And of course, we also are interested in infant mortality rates. How many of every 1,000 children, how many of them die in that first year? That's infant mortality rates. How many of them don't make it through that first year? And life expectancy, this is really important to me, something I'm focused on as I get older. What's the average age at which a person can expect to which a person can expect to live? For quite a long time, human life expectancy has been increasing. However, in 2020, when the pandemic hit, of course, the life expectancy went down a couple years, but it isn't only because of the pandemic. It's also because we are seeing that people are developing at younger and younger ages illnesses that we didn't see in younger people previously. Things such as high cholesterol, diabetes, high blood pressure. These are things that we would only expect in older people, and for a long time that's really the only place we saw them. But younger people in their teens, late teens, 20s and 30s are developing these things too. And of course, for the medical profession, there's a lot of evidence, given the research, that a lot of it has to do with the way that we live, the way that we eat, our lack of exercise. Okay, so this is the global life expectancy as of 2016. Yes, it is getting old, but remember that this is shared by WHO, the World Health Organization, and they do every 10 years, just like the U.S. Census does its every 10-year demographic big study. They also are focused on every 10 years, how do we gather information from all these countries. One thing I do want to point out here is that So I want to point out to you the areas where the highest life expectancy is, and that is Canada, in the red there, but also this area of Asia, which you can't really see very well here. And then the average are the pinks, which is, of course, the United States, as well as most of South America, and then the northern part of Africa, and then, of course, all of Russia and some Central Asian countries as well. Not all. And then in the central and western parts of Africa, and then that one little area over here on the east part of Africa, the life expectancy is much lower. Okay, so not everybody has the same expectation for living to a particular age throughout the world. Migration. It's the movement of people from one geographic area to another. And it's for the purpose of resettling, not just going to visit, but to go and live someplace differently. Now, of course, there is immigration, and of course, we think about immigration, meaning people coming into the United States, but there are people who emigrate, with an E, emigrate and move outside of the United States to live somewhere else as well. Smaller numbers, but still, that does happen. So let's get to the three theories of population change. Thomas Malthus was a mathematician, researcher, philosopher, and during the Industrial Revolution, which is during the time period he was living, he became very concerned about population growth. And he, again, given the Industrial Revolution, think about what's going on. People are moving from rural areas to cities. Cities are crowded. But at the same time, agriculture is seeing changes too. There's some mechanization there, which means then that food can be grown in larger quantities with fewer people, which is why some people are able then to move to the cities. And so, of course, we see other things such as electricity starts to be developed and other kinds of mechanization. This starts to make things easier, faster for humans to not only produce food, but also to produce goods and services. And what he's seen is this is supporting a growing population. And Malthus is of the mind that population growth is exponential. So it doubles each time. So you have two parents, they have 2 children, now you've got 4 people. And those 4 people each have 2 kids, now you got 8 people. And those people each have 2 kids, and now you got 16, and now you got 32, and then you have 64, and then you have 128, etc., etc. He believed that population growth would outpace the arithmetic growth of food production and other types of resources. And so he believed that we were going to get to a situation where there were too many people needing too many goods and services and resources like food and water, and that the Earth would not be able to support that. Now, that didn't happen. However, if you look here, this is a chart of the population growth over the last 2,000 years. And you see it starts in year 0 of the Common Era, only about 300 million people in the world. And, that's something that demographers can't be sure of. That's why there's a question mark. So they think there were about 300 million people in the world around year 0 of the Common Era. And of course, we know that before that was the time period where we had before the Common Era, so 300 before the Common Era, and then Jesus came along and all that. So they were looking really only at the 0 year where we start to get to the Common Era. And of course, this goes all the way through. You see that population is growing throughout these every, couple hundred years, but it's growing slowly. You see that it's growing very slowly. We don't get to about 1 million people until right about here in 1800. Okay? So it takes about 1,800 years to go from about 300 million people in the world to 1 million. But then look at what happens after that. Between 1800 and 1930, within 130 years, the population doubles. Now it's at 2 million by 1930. And then look what happens in an even shorter time frame. Only 30 years later, now the world's population is at 3 million. And then only 15 years later at 4 million, 12 years later at 5 million, 12 years later at 6 million, 11 years later at 7 million. And we are now right about 8 million people in the year 2022. It is projected that by 2050, we'll be somewhere around 9.5 million people in the world. Okay, so that does have some people now reviewing Malthus's ideas and wondering, could he have been onto something? Maybe it didn't happen as quickly as he thought, but maybe it's still going to happen. And so that's where you get the other two theories. The neo-Malthusians, neo means new, So the neo-Malthusians or the new Malthusians and the anti-Malthusians. The neo-Malthusians, of course, they believe that, okay, whoa, wait a minute. Malthus was right. Um, it didn't happen in his lifetime, but we see it happening now, where the world's population is growing at such a fast pace compared to the first 1800 or 2000 years that just in this last 22 years we've doubled the population, and so we need to be concerned about that. Of course, the anti-Malthusians are saying, there's plenty of space for everyone. There's plenty of resources. In fact, probably what's going to happen is that we'll see that population growth will start to slow. And that will be largely because of technology, because of people choosing not to have children. And in fact, anti-Malthusians argue some countries we're already seeing are seeing a negative population growth. And that is true of Japan, of some countries in Asia, and it would be true of the United States too if we didn't have immigration. Because the American birth rate, as I said, actually I said that about life expectancy. However, since 2020, when the pandemic hit, the birth rate in the United States has gone down a little bit. 2020 went down a little bit, 2021 went down a little bit, 2022 went down a little bit. Now, that, it's not for us to get worried. We're not in the situation that Japan is yet. But for some reason, people in the United States are having fewer children. Even immigrants who typically had larger families are having smaller families. And so two differing viewpoints about what's going on with the world population. Of course, as I said, the birth rate's gone down by 4% from 2019, and that was double the average rate of decline of 2% since 2014. So, and this was something I pulled up just last fall, so 2021. And so, yeah, we're seeing that maybe birth rates are a little bit lower than but maybe it's not time to get worried yet either, right? So something to consider. I put a graph in there you can take a look at. And then the theories of population change. So another idea is demographic transition. Demographic transition is something that anti-Malthusians believe in. They believe that we're going to go from that high birth rate to lower birth rates, and that the lower birth rates and the lower death rates are going to stabilize the population, right? So they're thinking, and again, this is part of the anti-Malthusians. Wait, hold up. So demographic transition is part of the neo-Malthusians. They're thinking that, or actually, neither one, this is not in either one of those. It's just a different idea. The thinking being that societies over, at different periods of time, of course, not every country is going to go through change at the same time. But the thinking is this, that countries will start to see the change from lower birth rates, lower death rates, which will stabilize the world population. That, yes, some places may still continue to have larger populations, but other countries will see their birth rates, will go lower, and their death rates will remain low. And so even though those countries where there are lots of people being born, they tend to have lower life expectancies. So the thinking is everything is going to level out over time. The anti-Malthusians are thinking that the opposite's going to happen. Remember, these are the people who think Thomas Malthus was right. They're saying, well, that's not going to happen, because what we're seeing happen is places such as China and India and parts of Africa, they are going through the same industrializing period now, about 150 years after the United States and westernized countries did, but they're going through that now. And what we saw happening with the Western world, US and Europe, when they went through that industrializing period, was that populations increased dramatically. And China, India, some countries in Africa are going through this process right now. So that whole stabilization of the demographic transition is not going to happen. Again, who, I don't know, I haven't done enough research to know whether one or more of these is the right idea, but both of them make some sense. Urbanization is something we've been seeing from the last century, right around the 1920s and 30s. We started seeing a lot more people. I mean, we saw it during the industrializing period as well, where people were leaving rural areas and moving to cities to work in factories and textile mills, etc. But we've seen even more urbanization in the 1960s and 70s, where large numbers of people are moving from urban areas or from rural areas to more urbanized areas. And we've also seen suburbanization as well, where people live outside of the city center in surrounding cities that we call suburbs. So if you think about the city of LA, think of downtown LA, think of all the suburbs around it, from areas that are part of LA, but they're not in the city center, to cities that are around LA, like Pasadena, Burbank, Glendale, but then also places such as Boyle Heights, Lincoln Heights, City Terrace, etc. That's considered to be suburban area. And of course, this is just a little chart here about where we've seen the urban population, and there are still some places in the United States where there is not really any urban population, where there's a lot of open, free space still, and those tend to be the states up in here in Wyoming, Montana, etc., coming down here, and then of course the eastern seaboard and the south and the Pacific Northwest, as well as the Four Corners areas, are fairly highly urbanized. All right, so now I want to get to this idea of suburbanization and thinking about how we live in suburbs. I know that many of us live in suburban areas. I used to live in Glendale when I lived in the LA area. Never lived in downtown, never wanted to. But there is starting to be this idea now that suburbanization has become too extreme, too much. And the term now being used is urban sprawl, where people are living further and further away from their workplaces. And indeed, there are people in the LA area who may live out in Riverside, or they may even live even further out, maybe Hemet or San Jacinto, or someplace, Palmdale, Lancaster, and they have 60, 75-mile drives one way. They may be on the road for 2 hours in the morning, an hour and a half on the way back at night, or an hour and a half in and 2 hours out. They are on the road for 2.5, 3, 4 hours. However, they're willing to do that because it's where they can afford to buy a home. They cannot afford to buy a home closer to where they work. And so some people argue that some of this urban sprawl is poorly planned, that there is not, for example, if you've ever driven on the 5 going to Northern California, there's an area you pass through once you come off of the Grapevine going toward the Bay Area. It's called the Tejon Ranch area. Before I left California, there was discussion about possibly building homes in that area. Keep in mind, this is a good, 75 to 85 miles, maybe even further than that, from downtown LA. And if you pass through there, you see that this is an area where, I don't know where they'd get water. I suppose power lines could be run through there, but there's no Metrolink that goes all the way out there. There is no public transportation that goes all the way out there. And so one There are no grocery stores, there are no parks, there's nothing out there. It's just barren land out there that was owned by the Tejon family that used to have a lot of ranching out there, and they don't do that anymore. You just have all this land. So apparently a developer has bought the land and is trying to convince environmental planners that this would be a great idea to build homes all the way out there. Because if you build homes, people will come. That's what we've seen in other areas of California, apparently. So I leave you to consider what that would mean if it does happen. Maybe somebody will buy houses out there. I don't know. Gentrification. I'm sure you've all heard this term. Depends on who you are in terms of whether you say gentrification or whether you say urban renewal. People who are supportive of renewing inner city areas or areas that are close to a downtown city center, who want to revitalize, in their words, this area. Maybe people come in and buy homes and they fix those homes up, and then maybe a Starbucks comes, and then maybe an art gallery comes, and then maybe some restaurants come. For some people, they say, well, this is urban renewal, right? We're making this space better for everyone. On the other hand, gentrification is a term that other people use because they view what happens when other people come in and start purchasing property and fixing it up and opening coffee shops, etc. They view this as mostly negative because the people who are already there get priced out of those areas. They're no longer able to be there. They can't afford it. And many people rent where they live. They don't own their homes. And so if the landlord sells the apartment building or the duplex where they live to somebody who comes in and fixes it up and now can charge more rent, then that prices these people out of living in this area. In addition to that, the mom and pop places that they frequented, the mom and pop, taco shop or barbecue place or little, the liquor store, the bar, or the hairdresser, etc. These people now can no longer afford to rent space there anymore. And so now these barbers and these hairstylists that have been there for decades, these mom and pop places, they can't afford the lease on the place anymore where they have had their business for years, and so they're priced out. And so then income more place, other businesses that can afford the rent, but of course they're charging higher prices for whatever goods or services they're providing. So I leave you to consider and think about for yourself whether you consider it gentrification or urban renewal. All right, and let me see, get to talking about the environment. You probably have to have your head stuck in the sand not to recognize that the planet that we live on is changing. That what we see today is not how the planet looked 50 or 100 or 500 or 2,000 years ago. We as humans, we have created a lot of things that are good for us, positive for us, but maybe have not been good for the planet itself, the climate around us that supports our life, but also the animals as well. I was listening to a podcast, I don't know, maybe a couple months ago, and there was a discussion about how light pollution affects animals and how most people are unaware of it. For example, bats. It's part of that podcast. Bats, they are nocturnal animals. They need darkness, and they navigate using these sensory perceptions they have, and they don't need light. In fact, light blinds them. That's why they stay in caves all day long. Well, in many national parks now, there are campgrounds that have lights. There are food places that have lights. If you go to Yosemite or you go to I don't know, Sequoia or any of these national parks that we have. They're all open late in the summer, and of course there are food services and there are lights in the parking lots, etc. And so some of these nocturnal animals can no longer hunt the way that they used to because the light throws off their sensory perception. These nocturnal animals rely on their sensory perception, not on vision, and the light just makes it difficult for them to see their prey. And so some of these species are the numbers are beginning to dwindle. And that's just one thing that as humans we don't really think about. Like, yes, light's great for us, but how is it affecting other occupants of this planet that we may be unaware of? And of course, the environmental problems that have been caused by humans, anywhere from the light pollution to pollution of the air to water pollution. There's more than one kind of pollution. And of course, as humans, we have caused a lot of this. I was watching another documentary recently, earlier this week, about coral. And coral in the world's oceans is disappearing. It's getting bleached out. It's white. Now, I know maybe some of us have found coral on the beach and it's white and we think, oh, how cool, white coral. But it's not supposed to be that way. It's supposed to have color. It's dead when it's bleached white. And so the Great Barrier Reef in Australia, the second largest barrier reef by Belize, it's part of Belize's ocean area. These are the two largest barrier reefs in the world, and they are dying. They're dying because the water is too warm. And coral dies when the water's too warm, which means then that not only does the coral die, but all the animals, the different types of fish and other sea life that feed off of what grows in the coral, they now don't have a food source either. And then of course, there's the warming of our climate that's throwing off all kinds of weather patterns. I've been reading about how within the last couple weeks, Europe has been under a heat wave. And that's difficult for them because Europe typically doesn't get warmer than the mid-70s during the summer. And if it's 100 or 104 and there's no air conditioning because you've never needed it before, that's a huge problem. And of course, they've had a drought too. And some rivers are so low that barges, which take things up and down rivers from small cities to small cities, goods and supplies, they can't navigate because the rivers are too low. And so all of these environmental problems that we can think of and that we know of are really, really problematic for not only us as humans, but also for the animals that share this planet with us. And of course, if we cease to, if they cease to thrive, then we may cease to thrive as well, because we depend on, say, bees. Bees are important for fertilizing. They're important for, not fertilizing, there's that word, for pollinating. They're important for pollinating many of the plants and vegetables, trees, like the nut trees, the almond trees, the various flowers that we see. Bees are really important, and yet their numbers are dwindling. And so if we no longer have bees to pollinate all the fruits and vegetables and nuts and everything else that we eat that's not an animal, then maybe we cease to have a lot of these different species that we're so used to. And then for myself as a vegan, that's not a good thing, because maybe I have to start eating meat again, which I wouldn't want to do. But so anyway, lots of issues for us to consider. So that's it for this chapter 15 overview.